to go over the main points of the reading foreign influences on Old English. Um, this video, as I said before, is to go over the main points, and it's also very important to remember that doing the reading before watching this video is almost mandatory because in the reading there are many details and aspects that may not be part of this presentation, so please don't skip the reading. And the idea is that you rather use this video to wrap up what you have read, maybe to clarify some doubts, or to write down some questions that you still might have at the end of the reading and at the end of the video. So please don't skip the reading. Alright, so I'm going to start with the explanation of the main points of the reading. Foreign influences on Old English. English is a language that that was influenced by different communities, the Celts, the Romans, and also the Scandinavians, and also the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes, who were Germanic tribes. These people had a great impact on the English that we speak today and the Old English, which is the language that we are going to analyze in 1 or 2 weeks. We're going to start analyzing the syntax, morphology, and other aspects of the language. So we have to understand the history in order to better understand the different variations in different aspects in terms of syntax, grammar, morphology, phonology of Old English. Okay, well, basically this reading talks about these groups, the Celts, the Romans, and the Scandinavians, who had a great impact on English. And the first group that influenced English is the Celtic group. Remember that Celtics were all around the island first. When the Germanic tribes came to the island, they were displaced and they were forced to go to the west part of the country. So they lived in this area. There were also Celtic people in Ireland, the Irish and Gaelic culture. And up here in the north, and the Scottish and the Picts were also Celtic people. When the Germanic groups came, some of them fled, some of them decided to abandon the island, and others stayed in the island. There are some words that today we can trace back to the culture of the Celtic people. For example, the name of the kingdom of Kent. Kent is a word that comes from Celtic, and it comes from Canti and Cantune. The name of certain cities such as London, Winchester, Salisbury, Worcester, Canterbury, Thames, which is the name of the river that goes along London, and the name Avon, which is also a name of a place. Those names come from Celtic culture. These names are more common in the west part of the country, over here, and here too, although there may be some Celtic names of cities on the east side, but they are fewer. Obviously, they are fewer because the Celts were on the western part of the country, of the island. Some of these words, the words that such as London, Winchester, some of them were learned and they were influenced through contact between other groups, such as the Irish monks who came from Ireland. Right. For example, we have the word bin, crag, cum, which means valley. Today we have the word, in English we have the word bin with one N, and that means basket or waste basket. It's very common to hear people saying put it on the bin rather than put it in the basket in England, especially in the north. Angkor is another term which means hermit, and star, which means history. Basically, this is the influence of the Celtic language. There is no much to talk about it, because remember that these people were also the same group of Britons, and they were not like very strong warriors. So when the Germanic tribes came, this culture were absorbed by the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes. So there is little information. There are not many words today that are part of the Celtic group. Right. So this is the first group. Now, the second culture and language that had a lot of influence on Old English is Latin. But Latin is so complex because it had 3 different influences, which the author of the reading explains. The first influence, or the first period of influence, was from the from the encounters that Anglo-Saxons or the Germanic tribes had with the Romans before traveling to the island. Okay, so the Anglo-Saxons, they were in their country or in their lands, what we call today Denmark. In those places, they had some contact with Romans, especially especially contacts related to with commercial purposes, with trade, and perhaps with war. Because of war also they might have fought. So this contact perhaps yielded some adoption of words, of Latin words, in the Germanic communities. Right. So as you can see here in this picture, this is the Roman Empire. The Anglo-Saxons and Jutes were over here, right over here, and they would sail the sea and trade with the Romans over here. That was before traveling to England, before settling down in Britain. Some of those words which are product of this intercommunication are words related to war. For example, camp, which meant battle, seng, which meant banner, pill, pointed stick or javelin, whale, which meant wall, and the word strat, which is road or street today. There were also words adopted, words related to trade. Chap, for example, which meant a bargain or something cheap. Pund, which means pound today, and munit, which meant coin. Win for wine, cutil for kettle, what we call today, like in Spanish, una olla, right? So again, I repeat, these words were adopted by the Germanic tribes before traveling to England, before traveling to Britain. Now, the second influence of Latin in Old English is through the Celtic transmission. As we discussed in the previous class, England was first occupied by the Roman Empire, and by year 410 or something, they left the island and the Celts were there. They had some contact with the Celts. The Roman had some contact with the Celt, but there are very few words from this period because the Romans were living on the southeast part of England, and the Celts inhabited the rest of the country. And although there were some fights, in general terms, the relationship was not that bad. But they were separated, right? They didn't mingle. They didn't live together. So there was no much intercommunication to adopt words. However, some of those words are the ones that has the ending chester, from Latin castra, which means a camp or a town or community. Some of these examples are the name, certain names of cities, for example, Manchester, Lancaster, Walchester, Winchester are also examples of this Latin influence through Celtic transmission. The author in the reading also tells us that not all the words with Chester mean that the Romans lived there, or that this word comes from especially from Romans who had influenced the Celtic. No, this Chester ending was later on adopted, and it was used to name cities some years later. Something interesting, guys, to mention about that. That's why I put this picture here. This is called the Worcestershire sauce. This is actually the sauce that, like the original sauce from which salsa lisana or salsa inglesa is derived from. And something that happened to me when I lived in England was that I wanted to make some gallo pinto, and I went to the supermarket looking for. I used the literal translation English sauce. Nobody understood, of course, because that doesn't exist. I mean, they don't know what that is by the name English sauce. We call it like that, but the real name of that sauce, the one that is most similar to what we know as English sauce, is this one. It's called Worcester sauce. So if you ever go to England and you want to prepare some gallo pinto, don't look for salsa lisano or English sauce. This is the name of it. Obviously, this one is more liquid and doesn't taste the same, of course, but it's the one that is most similar to salsa lisano. Okay, that was just a parenthesis to tell you something that happened to me and something interesting about this product. Let's continue with the presentation of the reading. Okay, in this part, the author, on page number 75, the author writes, it is possible that some of the Latin words that the Germanic speakers had acquired on the continent, such as street, which comes from strata, via, wall, wine, and others, were reinforced by the presence of the same words in Celtic. So that means that, okay, the Germanic tribes had some contact with the Romans, and then some years later, hold on a second, some years later, they came to the island, and they found that the Celtic people were also using some of those words, such as wall, wine, and street, well, strata or strat in Old English, because the Celts had also had contact with the Romans. So these this, let's call it coincidence, helped reinforce the adoption of these Latin words. Now, the third period that the author of the reading mentions is the Latin influence of the second period of the in other words, the Christianization or Christianizing of Britain. Okay, what happened here? It says, the greatest influence of Latin upon Old English was occasioned or caused by the conversion of Britain to Roman Christianity beginning in year 597. Bede, which is an important writer of this time, he reports the story of Saint Augustine in year 597. So, what is the story behind Saint Augustine? He was a monk in Rome, and the Pope at that time, who was Saint or Pope Gregory, he asked him to go to England and convert everybody into the Christian religion, right? So the monk was kind of scared, but he took the mission. He traveled with other monks to the island of England. He was very scared, and he arrived into the kingdom of Kent. In the kingdom of Kent, we had the king Ethelbert, whose wife was Bertha. Bertha was a Christian woman. She was not from England. She was from what we call today France. But she married Ethelbert on the condition that she be allowed to practice the Catholic or Christian religion, right? So when Saint Augustine came to the island to the kingdom of Kent, he asked Ethelbert to allow him to build a church, and Ethelbert, who was an Anglo-Saxon king, gave him permission to do so. Probably Bertha also had some influence on the decision of Ethelbert, and St. Augustine built a church, and the kingdom of Kent became all Christian, or like around 10,000 people were baptized by the Christmas of year 597. And history also tells us that 20 years later, Northumbria, which was a kingdom in the north, had already become Christian. Also, 10 years later, after St. Augustine came, the whole England was Christian by year 700 approximately. Now, what was the effect of this Christianization of England? Remember that these people built churches and monasteries, and the language, and the Latin was the language of service and schools. Remember that monks also taught people. They taught the language and the Bible, and they used Latin to teach that to the rest of the people. So in that moment, or in that period, there was a rapid adoption of many Latin words. The author of the reading also mentions Venerable Bede, who was a student and monk of this time. And Bede is very important because he wrote the ecclesiastical history of the English people by year 731. This piece of writing is very important because it's a good source of information for people to, or for us to know about the history of England and how the Germanic tribes came to the island, and all the story of the Christianization of England. Many of the aspects I'm sharing with you today, and many of the aspects that we read in the reading, come from this source, the ecclesiastical history of the English people. Now, we're going to talk about the earlier influence of Christianity on vocabulary. The first introduction of Christianity caused a rapid adoption of many Latin words, as I explained before. Some of these examples are the words alms, altar, angel, anthem, Arian, ark, candle, canon. So as you can see, terms related to church, and also words from the school context. For example, school, master, verse, meter, class, notary. Those are words that were adopted in this period of Christianization. Something interesting that the author mentions in the reading also is that the application of native words to new concepts. He says that English didn't always adopt a foreign word to express a new concept. Although the words God, heaven, hell, and gospel are related to religion, these words do not come from Latin. They the people of that time continued using their original term for those objects or entities, such as God, heaven, hell, and gospel. These come from Germanic, pure Germanic words. These are Germanic words. Okay, that's about it related to or regarding the history of the Latin influence, the three periods or the three stages of influence of Latin on Old English. Now, we're going to talk about the Scandinavian influence, the Viking Age. This interesting period was near the end of the Old English period. The Germanic inhabitants of the Scandinavian peninsula and Denmark, these were some people who used to attack the lands near the north and the Baltic Sea, and also they came to England, and they stole things from the monasteries and from churches. They killed people. They were very good at fighting to make matters worse. So they kind of scared the whole England. Actually, history says that some of the kings would pay to the Vikings, so they would go either back home or go to another kingdom, so they would be safe. The kingdom wouldn't be attacked and raided. However, these people continue coming to the island of England. It says that by year 869, East Anglia and York had been taken by King Edmund, and King Edmund was killed. That was an event that shocked the whole country. The Danes tried to take the Wessex. However, there was a treaty there between, the treaty was called Wedmore, between King Alfred and Guthrum. And the attacks stopped for some time. And but some years later, the Vikings, or the Scandinavian people, came back and actually took control of the whole country for several years. We have the King Canute over there, famous king who ruled England and also other countries. Right. Now, what is the influence of the Scandinavians on vocabulary? This is pretty interesting. Well, first, the author tells us that it is hard to tell if a word is a borrowing from the Scandinavian culture or it is a native language from the Germanic tribes. Remember that the Germanic tribes and the Scandinavian area are geographically close to one another, to each other, and their languages also shared some characteristics. So sometimes for linguists, it is hard to tell if a word is from Scandinavian influence or it actually belonged to the Germanic tribes that arrived in England. However, there are some, but there's this special sound sk, s plus k, which is typical, and it is thought to certainly come from Scandinavian influence. Okay, what happens with this sound? It says that the sk in Old English, in the Germanic languages, in the language of the Germanic people, and in Old English, was palatalized, right? That means that the sk in Old English would sound something like sh. For example, ship, shell, fish. and well, they have like sh in what we have when we have sh in modern English. That was the sound of the sk in Old English. However, in English we have words such as sky, skin, skill, scrape, scrub, bask, whisk, that keep this strong pronunciation of of the s and the k. This hard pronunciation of the k and also the g, such as in kid and give and get and egg, make experts believe that these words were adopted from Scandinavian influence because the Nordic languages, this is a typical consonant cluster or a group of consonants that is typical in Nordic languages. One of them, the languages of, or the language of the Vikings, the Scandinavian language. So they say that the word sky, skin, kid, give, get are words from these people. Otherwise, if they had not been adopted from the Scandinavian, they would have been pronounced as sky, skin, skill. But we don't pronounce them like that today, right? And they were not pronounced like that back then. So that's why they say that these are, we can be certain that these words come from the Vikings. The author also mentions some names, such as, well, names that end in son, such as Stevenson and Johnson, typical in Nordic languages. And if you want to read a full list of words with Scandinavian background, you should read page 90 in the reading. There you can find a more complete list of words from the Vikings. Now, what is the effect on grammar and syntax? These people also influenced the syntax of English. The present plural are of the verb to be is a significant adoption of the significant influence or adoption from the Scandinavian influence. They used another word. They use another word instead of are. It doesn't mean that the are didn't exist in, or the plural present for the verb to be didn't exist in old English. They use the word syndom to refer to are instead of are. It says that the author also mentions that the s of the third person singular is an influence of the Scandinavian languages. The participial ending and, such as in bindend. Obviously, this word, we don't have this word in today's English, but the ending and, which in that moment, this is the equivalent for the ing in words today. For example, working, singing. This is the present participle ending. And this is pretty interesting too. The omission of the relative pronoun. What is that pronoun? That. I wrote an example here. The dog that I saw, or guys, that you can say the dog I saw. For example, if I say, I really liked the dog that I saw, I can say the dog that I saw or the dog I saw. This omission of this relative pronoun, which is present today in English, is thought to be adopted from Scandinavian languages, Northern languages, because this is this omission of this word is also typical in Nordic languages. Okay, these were some of the main points of the reading, guys. Please go over the reading in case you haven't done it or something. Well, I'm sure, pretty sure that all of you have already done the reading. But don't just watch this presentation or this video because you will miss a lot of important details and a lot of information that is necessary to understand future topics or future contents that we will be covering. And so that will be it for today, guys. This is it. I will be available if you have questions about the reading. And what else? Probably I'll make another video to give you the instructions on what you have to do for today's class. That's it. Thank you very much. Bye bye.